Unicorns Talk is a weekly podcast where we discuss the ups and downs of the human experience, from personal growth to romantic relationships and everything in between. This show is for life livers, life lovers, and life enhancers. My name is Latrice Sampson Richards, your life enhancement coach, and together we're going to laugh, love, and learn to maneuver all of life's little messes. Let's go. Hey everybody, it's Latrice Sampson Richards here, your life enhancement coach, and today's episode is going to be really interesting, but it's one that I'm really passionate about at the same time. I had a whole different topic scheduled for to talk to y'all about today, but after all of the events that took place this weekend in Charlottesville, Virginia, I just felt like I have to say something about it. I have to, try to educate and do my part in the healing of our nation, or helping us to understand how to heal. I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but I did feel like this was something that I needed to address. And so I'll, put off my topic that I had planned for today to next week and really kind of address this situation as much as I can. And I hope that you find this information to be helpful. My goal is not to offend anyone. However, my goal is not to make you like me either. My goal is to help you. And so if you're listening to this and you are offended by something that I say or some piece of information that I present to you all today, then I think that's a really clear indicator that maybe you need to dig a little deeper and understand your own issues around racism in our country. Okay. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Just a quick recap if you're not familiar with what happened this weekend. On Saturday, August 12th, in Charlottesville, Virginia, there was a white nationalist rally, and the rally was permitted and everything like that. Not that that matters, but there's videos showing the attendees of that rally chanting "Jews will not replace us" and wearing swastikas. So this is a white nationalist rally. Let's not be confused about what white nationalists believe. This is a white supremacy, KKK, neo-Nazi rally. There's no other way to describe that. During that rally, a neo-Nazi member, I guess, I don't know just a neo-Nazi named James Alex Fields ran his car into a group of counter-protesters, killing one person and injuring several others. And he got in his car. This is on video as well. If you haven't seen the video, I definitely urge you to look it up and seek it out with caution, because it's definitely can be very triggering. It's a horrid sight, and every time I see the video, whether it's like it just pops up on my Facebook feed or something like that, like a chill goes through my body every single time that someone could do something like that. But it did happen in real life, and somebody actually lost their life as a result of this. And so today I really want to tackle the idea of white supremacy, white privilege, and try to help us to understand how and why this happens, and then give us some tips on how we can try to resolve these issues moving forward. All right. And also, I'm going to do a reality check today, which is going to be for the entire crew at Black Ink Chicago. Okay. Yeah. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay. So like I said, this weekend there was a white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, and it really has opened up the floor for a wider range of discussion around white supremacy, racism, and white privilege. I think it's really important for us to understand the actual definitions of white supremacy and white privilege. And, I'm going to give a couple definitions today. Some, these definitions kind of come from my understanding of these concepts, but then also I did some research to try to give you as well-rounded understanding of these things as possible. Okay, I'm going to define white supremacy as a systemic effort to fortify wealth, power, and privilege for whites on the basis or belief that they are more deserving due to their skin color. Now, in my opinion, I believe that white supremacy is born out of a basic need for survival. And I could get into that a whole lot more, but I have definitely some ideas around white supremacy based on research that I've done and things like that. I think that there are a group of white people or a group of people who believe that that in order for the white race to survive, to move into future generations, they have to be on top. They have to be perceived as being on top. And there's a lot of theories as to why that might be, but that's neither here or there. I just feel like that's another topic for another day. But anyway, white supremacy has been incorporated in every aspect of our culture and government. And as a result of that incorporation, it leads to white privilege. All right. And white privilege, I'm defining as when someone is granted an unearned favor, advantage, opportunity, benefit of doubt, and or freedom as a result of the institutionalized ideals of white supremacy, solely based on their white skin color. All right. So white privilege is not about having or coming from money. It's not about being given, things. A lot of white people that I've had this conversation with in the past who deny white privilege exists, they do so because they say, I fought for everything that I ever had, or, nobody never gave me nothing. It's not about being given opportunities. It's about having opportunities. Okay. And that's two different things. Being more likely to receive opportunity is different than being given an opportunity. All right. It's based on the color of your skin. It's really about the lack of systemic oppression across multiple life areas, meaning economically, socially, academically, career-wise, family structures, all of those things. When you're not faced with the oppression of being a non-white, of course you can pick yourself up by your bootstraps and work hard and get whatever it is you need to get in this life. All right? Because you're privileged to do so. You're privileged enough to not have the scarlet letter, on your chest at all times, or on your skin for that matter. And that allows you more opportunity. All right, whether that opportunity is given to you by an individual or through nepotism or anything like that, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The fact that you walk around with white skin gives you more opportunity, point blank, period. And that is white privilege. All right. Now, when white people refuse to acknowledge their privilege, I think it allows the continuation of white supremacy. And so one of the reasons that I think it's really hard for white people to acknowledge that they have privilege is because of cognitive dissonance. So I want to talk really quickly about cognitive dissonance and help us to really understand what that is. Dictionary.com actually defines cognitive dissonance as anxiety that results from simultaneously holding contradictory or otherwise incompatible attitudes, beliefs, or the like, as when one likes a person but disapproves strongly of one of his or her habits. So in short, cognitive dissonance is the disconnection between your thoughts, beliefs, or values and your desired behaviors. All right. So when what you want to do does not coincide with what you believe, it creates dissonance. It creates a situation that is extremely difficult for you to be able to maneuver around, or for you to be able to stand your actions. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. All right. When that disconnection exists between what you believe is right and what you want to do, dissonance happens as a result of that. Before we can even attempt to resolve dissonance, we have to first acknowledge that it exists. We have to first be willing to say that, what I believe is not in parallel with my desired actions or my desired behaviors, okay? That who I am or who I say or believe I am at my core is not congruent with the behaviors or the actions that I'm displaying. And that's extremely difficult for people to do. All right. Nobody wants to admit that that who they think they are, who they say they are, doesn't match up to the image that they're portraying or how they're treating people. Okay. Nobody wants to do that. We have to first acknowledge that these things exist and that these things are wrong and that these things need to change. And that is, I think, the fatal fault of America. Nobody wants to, or white America, honestly, nobody wants to acknowledge that this shit happened and is happening and that it is real. And that it's not just something that somebody picked out of the sky and decided to call it a bad word. Racism is a very real thing. White supremacy is a very real thing. White privilege is a very real thing. Race, in and of itself, is not real. But racism, very much alive. But we refuse to acknowledge it. And any clinician, coach, or helper worth their weight can let you know or will agree that in order to fix something, you have to first be willing to acknowledge that it exists and that it needs to be fixed. Okay? So once we acknowledge that these things exist, that these things are real, and that this dissonance is present, then we can take 3 steps to try to resolve that. And all 3 of these relate to change. All right? Change in perception, change in thought patterns, or change in action. Let's talk about the first one, change in perception. Change in perception, when I talk about the change in perception, we're talking about the perception of the action itself or the desired behavior. This is the most common resolve of dissonance. It's a change in a perception of the behavior, all right, which is basically rationalizing the behavior. This is the dehumanization of people. This is victim blaming. Okay? That's what this is. It's rationalizing the behavior. Okay? In order for us to be able to move past that dissonance and still engage in the behaviors that we want to engage in, we must dehumanize the person on the receiving end of that so that we can feel comfortable with treating them a certain kind of way. This is what has happened in white supremacy and white privilege, because you have a group of people who consider themselves to be Christians who say that everything that they do or have done is being done in the name of God, in the name of righteousness, and they have committed some of the most vile and repulsive acts ever known to man. Ever known to man. All in the name of this higher power that supposedly tells us to love your brother as yourself. That supposedly tells us to turn the other cheek. That supposedly tells us, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That doesn't match up. What you say you believe in, what you say you're acting in the pursuit of, does not match up with the actual behaviors that you're displaying. That is cognitive dissonance. Okay? And so you have to, what they have to do is make it okay, they have to dehumanize the people on the receiving end of that. Donald Trump, in his response to the rally and the happenings of this weekend, illustrated this perfectly. All right. He definitely went into victim blaming and a really strong attempt at normalizing the behaviors of those in attendance. All right. When he said that there's blame on both sides, he's trying to normalize those behaviors. He's trying to rationalize, all right, the heinous acts that took place at this rally. All right. Well, yeah, somebody got killed, but did you see those guys came in there with those clubs and this, that, and the other, and charged at the outright and this, that, and the third? Like, that's trying to rationalize the behaviors. So what you're saying is that the guy was justified in running over a group of people with a car because the night before some other people may or may not have started some trouble. He's rationalizing. He's victim blaming, attempting to normalize the heinous behaviors. Because what you say you stand for does not align with what you're actually doing. Okay? So while the change in perception of the action is the most common, is also the most detrimental, and is actually the one change that perpetuates the dissonance. It allows the dissonance to continue, only it relieves or alleviates the discomfort of the dissonance. All right? We don't want to be on that side of things. All right. The second way to resolve is actually the most effective way in terms of healing the dissonance, and that's to change your thought process or your thought patterns. All right. You can choose to believe something else, and I'm a very big believer in this. That you can choose to do something else, believe something else. You can educate yourself. You can educate others. All right. In real life, this will require for a white supremacist or a white person who believes that white people are superior or that white people deserve to have better things than everybody else. This will require for them to start seeing non-whites as human beings, to start seeing non-whites as equal, to spend some time with someone who's not white, a person of color, and actually see who they are and what they do and what it is that they want out of life. Change your perception, okay? Change the way that you believe that person to be. Educate yourself. Educate others. Once you get a deeper understanding, tell somebody else so they could get a deeper understanding also. All right. This is the most effective way to break the pattern of dissonance, not just to relieve the discomfort, but to remove the dissonance altogether. If you change your thoughts or your beliefs about the situation, then there's no longer there's no longer room for disconnection. You feel what I'm saying? Okay. And then the third method of resolve is to change your actions. Now, changing of the actions is the easiest point of intervention because it's hard to change your beliefs or your thought patterns. It is. It's extremely difficult. But changing your actions allows you to be able to start somewhere. It's the easiest point of intervention. All right. You may still somewhere in your mind believe that white people are better than people of color, but instead of, carrying around a swastika everywhere you go, you do something different. You leave the swastika at home today and see how those people interact with you then. All right. Change your actions, change your behaviors. Instead of, mean mugging or not, being rude, instead of being rude to a person of color, try smiling and saying, good morning, how you doing? And see how their response changes towards you. All right. It's the easiest point of intervention to do something different. When you do something different, you get a different outcome. All right. And if it's not the outcome that you're desiring, do something else. Do something else. Okay? So when we're talking about, resolving this cognitive dissonance, like I said, it starts with acknowledgement. We have to acknowledge that it exists and that it needs to be resolved. And then once we do that, we engage in change. Either we change our perception of the action, which allows us to continue to perpetuate the dissonance, right? It just alleviates the discomfort of it, but it doesn't resolve the issue. It doesn't make life better for yourself or for anybody else. It's a temporary fix. All right. And allows you to continue treating people horribly by rationalizing your behaviors. Or you can change your thought process or your thought patterns and your beliefs, or change your actions. All right. There are options. There are options. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about, I'm a silver linings kind of girl, and it's really important to me, I think, to see the silver lining in all negative events. And I do think that while this tragedy was, it's just absolutely horrible, I do think that there are some silver linings here. So I've been able to identify 3 silver linings as a result of this experience or this event that took place this weekend. The first is that I have noticed that there are more white people speaking up to other white people about racism, supremacy, and privilege. And I definitely see this as a silver lining. I think this is a positive thing because it's not enough for people of color to yell and scream and ask people, or try to explain to try to explain to non-people of color or white people about racism, supremacy, and privilege, because there's a defensiveness that just automatically comes into play. All right. It's going to take for other white people to educate their fellow, counterparts about racism and the fact and the reality that this exists. And I've definitely noticed the uptake of that since the events this weekend. The second silver lining is that it seems to have, this event seems to have ripped the Band-Aid off of the scab of racism in general. The conversation about racism has been a lot more fluid. The conversation around racism has been, it seems to me, a lot more readily absorbed. People have been more open to having this conversation than they have been in the past. I think it has lifted the veil. After these events this weekend, followed by the president's comments over the 3 days following that, I think that there's no way that anyone in this country can continue to choose to be oblivious to the issue of racism that exists in our country. All right. And so I feel like this event has ripped that veil off of racism in general, and it's really opened the floor to a much fruitful kind of dialogue and conversation, and kickstarted us in the direction of acknowledgement. All right. And then the third silver lining I see is that I really do believe that it has united us in a lot of ways. Now that, and it's sad to say, but now that white people are being affected by these changes, the young lady that lost her life, she wasn't black. She wasn't black. I'm not exactly sure of her nationality, I'll be 100% honest, but her skin tone was white. Okay? And that, you can count that on ignorance on my part. I don't know what her exact background was, but her skin tone was white. And so now that white people are being affected by racism and white supremacy and things like that, they are more compassionate to the struggles of blacks and other minority groups. And I think that is a good thing. Some people would argue that, it took for something to happen to them. And this and that. Yeah, and that's the way it happens. That is the way human beings work. Okay? Sometimes it's hard for somebody to have compassion for other people or to understand somebody else's point of view if they've never experienced it themselves. And so now that they are experiencing it, it is opening their eyes to the reality of what I deal with on a day-to-day basis as a person of color. And I think that is a good thing. I think that it opens the door for us to be able to work together to resolve this. Because believe it or not, whether you choose to believe it or not, we need each other in order to resolve this issue of racism in America. It's not going to happen any other way. All right. Okay, so that's all I got for y'all today. I hope I made sense. I hope that some of what I discussed today was helpful for you. I hope that some of it resonated with you. I hope that maybe it changed your mind about some things, that gave you a different perspective. It's time for us to start loving on each other, and time for us to start being there for each other the way that we really need to be, and to come together and really fight the powers that are really against us, recognizing and understanding that we are one people. We are one people. And I believe that God intended for us to live in harmony. I really do. All right. And so, if it takes these heinous things happening for us to really come together, then, I hope it happens sooner than later. I'll be honest. I hope it happens sooner than later, that we get our shit together and start loving on each other instead of hating each other and trying to tear each other down. All right. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you agree with what I'm saying. If you disagree, what's your perspective? What are your experiences with cognitive dissonance? Talk to me. All right. Let me know. Hit me up on the website, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff. Let me know what you think. All right. Coming up next is Reality Check. All right, so this week's reality check goes to the entire staff over at 9mag, which is the cast of the Black Ink Crew Chicago. So anybody that knows me knows that I do have some simple pleasures in life, and I really enjoy Black Ink for some reason. It is one of the shows that I definitely try to keep up with on television, and so the crew over at 9mag has been really having some issues these last couple episodes around boundaries. And so today I want to talk about the importance of establishing appropriate boundaries in dual relationships, because they definitely have a lot of dual relationships going on, right? And so a dual relationship is when you have more than one connection to the same person. All right, meaning someone is your friend but also your coworker. That's a dual relationship. Or maybe not just coworker. Let's say someone is your boss and your friend. That's a dual relationship. And a lot of times those dual relationships can cause conflict if the boundaries are not very clear. And I think this is exactly what we're seeing over at 9mag. There has not been a very clear delineation between the relationships. Ryan has not done a great job. Ryan, who's the shop owner, has not done a great job of creating separation between the roles that he plays with his staff members. And so they're getting things confused over there. And it's causing a lot of drama as he attempts to reestablish those boundaries. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about that real quickly, and then I'm going to kind of go through each of the main cast members and just kind of give a little synopsis of each of those characters, okay? Or what are they? Cast members, I guess they would be called. I mean, they are characters, but I guess they cast members as well. So they're having a little issue in the shop because Ryan is making a lot of changes and things and trying to restore some order. He feels like the staff has been very disrespectful to him in terms of his role as the boss and things like that. And the staff is really fighting back or pushing back against those changes because they feel like, they all participated in building the brand and that they should have some say so, especially Van, which, Van is completely out of line in across the board, Van is completely out of line. I'm not surprised, though, that Van is behaving the way that he is, just because of his background and things like that, but there's definitely a better way to be able to handle those things, and he needs to do a better job at that. I will say Ryan definitely should have done a better job in terms of handling the situation. I agree with him 100% that changes need to be made because he is the boss. It is his shop, and at the end of the day, he is responsible for what happens in that shop. However, he did create an atmosphere that promoted inclusion of the staff. And so, I think what he's failed to do is to validate their feelings as he reaffirms or resets the boundaries. He kind of just came in there guns a-blazing, like, my way or the highway, and the staff wasn't really having that because they never felt validated. They never felt like he understood what they were feeling. And at the end of the day, they have love for the shop. They love the shop. They love each other. And for a lot of them, it's the only home that they have, And so when they see all of the changes being made, it, I think, can trigger some abandonment issues or even some rejection issues and things like that. And so I think one of the first things that he could have done was to validate their feelings. It's extremely difficult to be logical when you're filled with active emotion, especially a high intensity of that emotion. Everybody was in their feelings, which means that nobody was listening to each other. Nobody was communicating well, because it is virtually impossible to communicate well when you are engulfed in emotion. I always tell my clients that logic and emotion don't mix. They don't even like each other. They don't want to be bothered with each other. It's like oil and water. They don't mix well. And so it's almost impossible to deal with or handle a situation that requires logic until you first process your emotions. And so everybody was reacting from an emotional place, trying to be logical. And that's why everything was blowing up in their faces. All right. I think that, a lot of them, Van and Ryan and even Danielle, to be honest, were communicating, eventually it became like an ego kind of thing, I think it started off as a sentiment or an emotional basis, like, we love this place, we love each other, and you're trying to cut us out. But eventually there was some ego that came in play there, especially when they started to lump up together and try to, like, revolt against Ryan. There was some ego there. I think the sentiment turned into ego. Okay, they love the shop, but they don't have nowhere else to go. They don't have anywhere else to go. And so they feel like because they don't have anywhere else to go, the shop can't survive without them. And that's a fallacy. That's just not the truth. Okay, I already kind of touched on Van and my thoughts about how he handled things. I think he was completely out of line in his actions. I think that Van definitely needs some anger management and needs to learn how to communicate more effectively. But I also think he needs to learn his place in that shop as an employee. And that place is separate than his place in his relationship with Ryan. Those are two different things, okay? And I think that breaking that window, who in their right mind believes that they could talk to their boss the way that Van was talking to Ryan and think you're going to keep your job? In what world? When? In what world? I would have been fired him long time ago, but that's just me. Okay. Kat has never really been one of my favorite people on that show because, I don't know. I feel like Kat really is only looking out for herself. She makes no qualms about it because the changes and things that Ryan is doing and making is no different than the things that Kat has been doing. No different. Last season, Kat moved out of the shop and moved upstairs to do her own thing. And everybody got mad at Ryan for giving somebody else her chair. Why? This season, Kat moved to a whole nother state. She moved on the other side of the country to pursue her own thing, open up her own shop. And everybody mad at Ryan for bringing in a new artist. Why? Ryan is not doing anything different than what Kat is doing. But for some reason, they hold him to a different standard. I don't think that Kat is really concerned about what's happening in that shop. Kat is trying, she's an opportunist, and I don't blame her for that. But she's trying to make her money and build her brand and get her life to where she wants to go. So why can't Ryan do the same thing? Okay? Speaking of Ryan, I definitely think that Ryan is doing the most in terms of how he's handling the situation. Like that whole scene at the party, like throwing those chips and stuff. I mean, he was out of line. He was doing the most. But he's definitely correct in his understanding that he has to do something. Something has to change. You can't run a business that way. Business is not for friendships. Business is for networking and connections. Acquaintances, okay, but not that hood, like we homies and this, that, and the other, anything goes. Business doesn't work like that. So I definitely agree that he needed to make some changes, but I don't necessarily agree with the way he's going about it. Danielle is a hot mess, okay? Danielle is in what I call a 1/3 life crisis. And this is, I don't know, I haven't really done any research on this, but this is just my thought process. I think that, how, we go through like a midlife crisis when we get to like our 50s or something like that. I feel like between the ages of about 25 to 35, I think that we go through a 1/3 life crisis, okay? And I think that it's when millennials and Generation Xers like myself are trying to figure out life, and we start experimenting. We start kind of having this spiral, and it's really difficult. We're unhappy. I think unhappy in 2 or more major life areas, like their career, romantic relationships, interpersonal relationships, finances, or spirituality. When you're unhappy or miserable in 2 or more of those places, I think you are officially in a 1/3 life crisis. And I think it's very typical that's where Danielle is right now. And I think that it's appropriate for her to be there. She's looking around and she's realizing that she wants more out of life and she doesn't know how to get it. But she knows that she's not there yet. You know what I'm saying? And it's causing her to reevaluate things, and it's causing her to just really have to be introspective and think about what it is she wants out of this life. And she's struggling with that. She's really struggling with that. But my hope is that she'll be able to get it together and be able to move forward. I'm going to do another episode once I think this through a little bit more, the 1/3 life crisis, and do some more research on it. I'm going to do an episode about this because I really think that it's a thing. I really do. I really think it's a thing. And so I want to do some research and see if anybody else thinks it's a thing as well. But I definitely think that that's where Danielle is. I also think that that's where Don is, to be honest. And Don is actually taking action, though. And I think that's the difference between Don and Danielle. We're watching him grow into an adult, like a responsible adult, a little bit at a time. He's getting there. And I'm really happy for him around that. I'm going to do another episode probably next week. I'll do a reality check specifically on Don and how he handled this situation in his marriage with Ashley extremely well. All right. But Don, just like Danielle, is in a 1/3 life crisis, but I think that Don is actually taking action. And that makes all the world a difference. All right. And then finally, there's Charmaine. And listen, Charmaine is not stupid. Charmaine is #team too much for sure. But she is not stupid. Charmaine, I think when it comes to the situation with Ryan and with these boundaries, she knows that he's right, but she also understands the what everybody else is saying in terms of the connection that they feel to the shop, and that he's not handling it the correct way. Now, toward the end there, Charmaine definitely got to be Charmaine and do, hashtag team too much stuff, but I think that she understands both sides of the argument, and she's trying to facilitate as much as she can, not very well, but as much as she can, some type of resolve. And at the end of the day, it does work, and they are able to resolve their issues and things like that. And I'm happy to see that. I'm sure that there's a lot more that took place behind the scenes that we didn't really get to see. And I'm excited about that because they do have a family atmosphere. They all have really come from difficult places and have really grown, or we're watching them grow into these really dynamic human beings, and I'm excited to see that happen for them. I'm always excited about positive movement, forward movement, and positive growth. So that's my reality check. When it comes to setting appropriate boundaries in dual relationships, you have to do that as early on as possible. You have to be willing to validate the feelings and needs of other people, process your own emotions, and set those boundaries. And you may have to do it multiple times. You're going to have to reinforce those boundaries, especially when you're changing boundaries that have already been set. So when you have inappropriate boundaries that were already set and you're trying to change those boundaries, then you're really going to have to be consistent in terms of reinforcing those changes over and over and over, because just because you decided that you was going to change doesn't mean that everybody got to get on board. All right, so being consistent in the enforcement of those changes is going to be extremely important for you moving forward, but it can happen, and it is necessary. It has to happen. All right, so that's my reality check for the 9MAG team. Love on each other, but be respectful of each other at the same time, and you all can make this come up together. Understanding, though, that Ryan is the boss. He is the head of that team, and allow him to follow you. Allow him to lead you. All right, allow him to lead you, because I do think that he's capable of doing it, and everybody can make that come up together. All right, because he really does love the team. He does. He loves the team. He loves the business, but he has to be a businessman first. And y'all need to give him the space to be able to do that. All right. So that's the reality check, and that's the show for this week. That's all I got for y'all this week. I really appreciate y'all as usual for tuning in and sharing and everything like that. I greatly appreciate it. Make sure you hit me up. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Latrice Sampson Richards, Twitter at LSamRichards. Go to the website LatriceSampsonRichards.com. If you're interested in working with me or want me to come and speak for your group or your organization, shoot me a contact form or an email via the website and let me know. All right. Once again, I love you all. I appreciate you all. And until next time, be well.